The heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung shut behind me with a loud, echoing thud. For a moment, I stood still, frozen in a room charged with 1,000 unspoken tensions. The scent of polished wood, stale coffee, and cold betrayal filled my lungs. Across the long mahogany table, the board members sat in 2 neat rows, their faces masks of false neutrality. Some watched me with thinly disguised triumph, others with pity they didn't have the courage to voice. Yet all of them, every single one, were complicit. At the head of the table sat Robert Hale, the chairman, adjusting his spectacles with an air of somber authority. He cleared his throat, a deep rehearsed sound that sliced through the heavy silence. "Joanna Harper," he began, voice slow and deliberate, "it is the decision of this board that you are hereby relieved of your duties as Chief Executive Officer of Crown and Clover, effective immediately." It was almost laughable, the formality of it all. As if the long knives had not been sharpened for months, as if the whispers in corridors and secret late-night meetings had not been orchestrating this moment with meticulous care. I swallowed the bitter taste of humiliation rising in my throat. My mind flashed back to sleepless nights, endless negotiations, the blood and soul I had poured into this empire. 7 years of sacrifice, torn away with a single sentence. Slowly, I turned my gaze towards Kayla Monroe, seated to Robert's left. Once, she had been my most trusted ally. A confidant. A friend. Now, she leaned back comfortably in her leather chair, a small victorious smirk playing on her lips. I saw it then, the glint of betrayal she no longer cared to hide. I straightened my back and adjusted the cuffs of my blazer with calm precision. There would be no tears today. No begging. No dramatic scenes to satisfy their smug appetites. "Is that all?" I asked, my voice cool and even. "For now," Kayla said sweetly, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further. I reached into my pocket, retrieved my company ID card, the one embossed with my name and title, and placed it carefully onto the table. It landed with a soft, final sound that seemed deafening in the stillness. "You might want to check your inbox," I murmured, just loud enough for those nearest to hear. Turning on my heel, I walked towards the door. The seconds stretched endlessly, the polished floor echoing each step of my heels. As my fingers touched the handle, the first vibration broke the silence. A phone buzzed on the table. Then another. And another. Behind me, the sound of frantic tapping grew louder. Gasps. Murmured curses. Kayla's voice, sharp and disbelieving. "What is this?" I did not look back. I knew exactly what they were seeing. Resignation letters. One after another. The head of design. The chief financial officer. The director of operations. Department leaders. Senior managers. Almost the entire upper echelon of Crown and Clover, walking out in solidarity. The empire they had stolen was already crumbling beneath their feet. I allowed myself a small, almost invisible smile as I pushed the door open. Outside, the London air greeted me with its usual chill. People bustled past on the grey pavements, umbrellas snapping open against a sudden drizzle. Life continued indifferently around me, unaware of the quiet revolution I had just set in motion. This was not defeat. This was liberation. And I would not disappear quietly. No, they had just made their gravest mistake. This was only the beginning. The rain had thickened into a cold, persistent drizzle by the time I stepped onto the narrow side street. London, in its usual grey melancholy, seemed almost to mourn with me. I pulled my coat tighter around me and hailed a passing black cab. "Where to, miss?" the driver asked, glancing at me through the rearview mirror. "West End. Percy Street," I replied. The cab pulled into traffic with a grunt of the engine. I leaned back against the worn leather seat, watching the city blur past the window. Rows of brick buildings, blurred neon lights, the occasional figure hurrying under umbrellas. My mind was elsewhere, weaving through plans, memories, and a dozen unresolved betrayals. It was not enough to survive this. I had to rebuild, to rise higher than before. And to do that, I needed allies. Not the hollow smiles and false handshakes of Crown and Clover's boardroom. No, I needed people with loyalty forged in fire, not in comfort. As the cab rumbled through the wet streets, I pulled out my phone. No messages from Lucy yet. Typical. She was always late, but brilliant. The kind of brilliant that could crack a company's vaults wide open with a few keystrokes. And Kiara. She would be waiting. Quiet, intense Kiara, whose instincts had never once steered me wrong. The cab jolted to a halt. I paid the fare and stepped out into the drizzle, squinting up at the narrow building in front of me. Faded green paint flaked from the windowsills. A battered brass plaque above the door read simply, Harper and Company. It wasn't much. A forgotten shell from my first days in the city, when dreams outpaced reality and money was a luxury. But it was still mine. The door creaked open under my touch. Inside, the smell of damp carpet and old paper hung heavy in the air. The lights flickered uncertainly as I stepped in. And there they were. Lucy, perched casually on the edge of a cracked leather sofa, twirling a pen between her fingers. Her hair was dyed electric blue today, a sharp contrast against the drabness of the room. She glanced up at me and grinned. About time, boss. Kiara stood by the far window, arms folded, gaze distant. Her dark hair fell over one shoulder, hiding most of her face, but I caught the glint of steel in her eyes. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. I closed the door behind me with a decisive click. We're starting over, I said simply. And we're not playing by their rules anymore. Lucy laughed softly, a dangerous sound. Kiara just nodded once, slow and deliberate. For the first time that day, warmth sparked in my chest. Real loyalty. Real power. Out there, Crown and Clover still believed they had won. They thought I would crumble, fade, become just another footnote in their history. They were wrong. Very wrong. Because in the ashes of betrayal, something fiercer was taking shape. And soon, they would regret ever underestimating Joanna Harper. The old office smelled faintly of mildew and forgotten secrets. As I shrugged off my damp coat, Lucy was already pulling out a battered laptop from a backpack scrawled with stickers. We'll need a new base of operations, she said, fingers tapping rapidly against the keys. This place has charm, but no security. Kiara stayed silent, her eyes scanning the room as if mapping every escape route. Always cautious, always one step ahead. I crossed the room and opened the blinds a fraction. Rain blurred the outside world into watercolors. In that moment, I realized how alone we were. No safety nets. No more cushioned landings. Lucy's screen flickered oddly. She frowned and tapped it. That's strange, she muttered. What is it? I asked, stepping closer. Someone's trying to tap into our connection, she said, her voice tightening. Old school methods. Very clumsy. Kiara moved instantly, pulling a small black device from her pocket. Within seconds, she was sweeping the room for hidden bugs. A prickle of unease ran up my spine. We had only just begun, and already the sharks were circling. Lucy's fingers danced faster now, her brow furrowed in concentration. They're not just watching. They're trying to plant something, she said. Malware. Trojan horses. Sophisticated, but amateur compared to what I can do. I nodded, my heart pounding. Trace them. Lucy grinned wickedly. Already on it. As the minutes ticked by, the room seemed to close in. The old clock on the wall ticked louder with each passing second. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed in the distance. Then Lucy froze. Oh hell, she breathed. You won't believe this. Tell me, I demanded. She turned the screen towards me. Lines of code scrolled past, but what caught my eye was a symbol stamped in the corner. A crimson clover, split into 4 twisted parts. Crown and Clover's signature. They know we're moving, Lucy said. And they're not going to play fair. Kiara finally spoke, her voice low and certain. They're afraid. The realization settled heavily between us. They weren't just trying to ruin me. They were trying to erase me. I squared my shoulders, staring at the flickering screen. Then let's give them something to be afraid of. Kiara smiled, a rare, fierce thing, and Lucy cracked her knuckles. We were no longer running. We were about to make the first move. And the game had only just begun. 2 nights later, we had a plan. Simple. Precise. Ruthless. Lucy found a secure way to intercept one of Crown and Clover's hidden servers. It was risky, but if it worked, we would get everything. Documents, identities, dirty secrets. We set up in a new hideout. A forgotten flat above an abandoned florist shop, heavy with the scent of dried lavender and rot. I sat in the center of the room, cross-legged, breathing deeply. Kiara adjusted a cracked window to let in the cold London air. Lucy hunched over her laptop, cables and wires twisting around her like vines. The plan was set to unfold at midnight. At 11:45, the door rattled. Kiara had a blade in her hand before the sound even finished. I grabbed a heavy torch. Lucy froze, her eyes flickering to the door. A knock, soft but deliberate. "It's me," whispered a familiar voice. "Kayla." I exhaled, shoulders easing just a little. Kayla. Fierce, loyal Kayla. She had been gathering intel for us, risking everything. I hurried to the door and unlocked it. Kayla stumbled in, dripping wet and shaking. Her eyes were wild, haunted. "They know," she gasped. "They know everything." Lucy jumped to her feet. "How?" "We covered our tracks." Kayla's gaze darted around the room. "It doesn't matter. You have to leave. Now. They're coming." Panic surged through me. I looked at Kiara, who gave a tight nod. We trusted Kayla with our lives. But something was wrong. Kiara's hand stayed on her knife. Lucy narrowed her eyes. I caught it too, then, a small red mark behind Kayla's ear. Fresh, barely scabbed. A tiny puncture wound. My mouth went dry. "Kayla," I said, stepping back, "what did they do to you?" Her face crumpled. Tears spilled over her cheeks. "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. "I'm sorry." The room exploded into motion. Kiara tackled Kayla to the ground. Lucy yanked out the laptop's battery, severing all connections. A dull thump sounded above us. Boots. Heavy. Deliberate. "They tagged her," Lucy said grimly. "She led them straight here." Kayla sobbed, hands covering her face. "They threatened my family. I had to. I'm so sorry." There was no time for anger. No time for grief. Only survival. "Out the back," Kiara snapped. We grabbed what we could, laptops, hard drives, burner phones, and sprinted down the narrow fire escape. Behind us, the front door splintered. Voices shouted. Gunshots echoed through the night. We didn't stop running. Not once. And as we vanished into the labyrinth of London's shadowed streets, I knew one thing for certain. The real war had started. London at night became a maze of danger. The neon lights blurred as we sprinted through alleyways, hearts hammering against our ribs. Lucy led us, darting through side streets only locals would know. Kiara was close behind, ever watchful, her hand never far from her concealed knife. I brought up the rear, ears straining for the sounds of pursuit. Sirens wailed distantly. Helicopters circled like vultures above. We couldn't go to ground yet. Not until we found a new safe house. Not until we knew who else had betrayed us. Kayla. The thought cut deeper than any blade. We had trusted her, loved her like a sister. And now, she was a weapon turned against us. We ducked into a boarded-up pub near Whitechapel. Lucy disabled a hidden alarm in seconds, and we slipped inside. The place was a time capsule. Cracked leather booths, dusty mirrors, the lingering ghost of old beer and cigarette smoke. Kiara shoved a heavy table against the door. I slumped into a booth, catching my breath. Lucy pulled out her burner phone and started working, fingers flying across the screen. She tapped into underground networks, whispered circles of resistance and rebellion. Information trickled in piece by piece. Kayla had given them everything. Names. Safe houses. Plans. Contacts. We were exposed, bleeding out in the open. I slammed my fist onto the table, making the glasses rattle. "We're dead if we stay still," I hissed. "They'll find us. Hunt us like animals." Kiara's eyes were sharp, glinting in the dim light. "Then we don't stay still. We strike first." Lucy looked up, something dangerous sparking in her expression. "I know where they're keeping the main database now. It moves constantly. Tonight, it's at the old City Hall underground vault." A tight, coiled silence fell. Breaking into City Hall was madness. It was suicide. But if we didn't, we'd have no chance at all. Kiara's lips curled into a grim smile. "Then we make them regret underestimating us." The plan formed quickly, brutal in its simplicity. Get in. Get the drive. Burn everything behind us. One shot. No second chances. We left the pub just before dawn, disappearing into the gray mist of the city. Above us, the sky bruised to purple and gold, and the crows screamed as if warning the world. Tonight, London would burn, and we would be the ones to light the match. City Hall loomed ahead, a hulking mass of stone and iron, half abandoned but heavily guarded beneath the surface. The mist clung to the ground, hiding our approach as we moved like shadows along the perimeter. Lucy scanned the building's blueprint on her tablet. There's a service tunnel under the west wing. It connects to the old vaults, she whispered. Kiara pulled a crowbar from her pack, flashing a grin that made my stomach knot. We moved fast. Silent. Invisible. The service tunnel was narrow, thick with the scent of rust and damp earth. Every step echoed like a gunshot in my ears. We descended deeper, torchlights flickering against the slimy walls. At last, we reached the reinforced steel door guarding the vault. Lucy set to work immediately, her hands steady even as the tension twisted tighter around us. Minutes ticked by. My heart pounded louder with every second. We had no idea how much time we had before patrols found us. Finally, with a soft click, the lock disengaged. We slipped inside. The vault was bigger than I had imagined. Rows of servers hummed in the dim light, guarded by a single sentry sitting at a security console. Kiara didn't hesitate. In 2 swift steps, she reached the man and struck, silent and lethal. He slumped without a sound. Lucy rushed to the mainframe, plugging in a small device that began copying the files we needed. Every second felt like an hour. The building seemed to breathe around us, as if sensing our presence. Suddenly, a red warning light blinked overhead. Motion detectors. They knew we were here. Almost done. Lucy shouted over the rising alarm. Heavy boots thundered in the corridor outside. No more hiding. Kiara kicked over a filing cabinet, creating cover. I drew my sidearm, muscles coiled and ready. The first wave of guards burst through. Gunfire exploded in the confined space, deafening and chaotic. We moved like water, slipping between columns and machinery. I fired instinctively, aiming for center mass. Kiara fought with brutal precision, dropping enemies before they could react. Lucy yanked the drive from the terminal. Got it. Move. We retreated under fire, hearts slamming against our ribs. The service tunnel was no longer an option. It was swarming with security. Plan B. Through the central lobby. Straight into the lion's den. Lucy blew the emergency release on a maintenance door. We barreled through, stumbling into the grand marbled hall. And there, waiting for us beneath the cold stare of statues and chandeliers, was Kayla. Armed. Armored. And smiling like she had already won. The chandeliers above us trembled as heavy footsteps filled the marble hall. Kayla stood in the center, her tactical suit glinting under the cold lights, a rifle casually slung across her chest. Her eyes met mine. No hesitation. No mercy. You should have stayed hidden, Joanna, Kayla said, voice echoing off the high ceilings. I gave you a chance. I tightened my grip on the pistol. We make our own chances. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then chaos erupted. Kayla fired first, a precise burst that tore through the air where I had just been standing. Kiara flipped a marble bench for cover, dragging Lucy down beside her. I sprinted left, drawing Kayla's attention away from them. Bullets shattered the floor tiles at my heels. Lucy scrambled to the side, clutching the data drive to her chest like a lifeline. We needed to get out. But Kayla was between us and the exit, and she wasn't alone. From the side corridors, more guards poured in, weapons raised. Outnumbered. Outgunned. But not outmatched. Kiara rose from behind cover, twin pistols blazing, each shot sharp and deliberate. Guards dropped like dominoes, but more kept coming. I vaulted over a shattered statue, ducking as Kayla's rifle barked again. She was too good too fast. I had to get close. Using a broken column as cover, I edged forward, every nerve screaming. Kayla advanced too, methodical and unstoppable. Then Lucy, hidden in the chaos, triggered an emergency lockdown protocol. Metal shutters began slamming down across doors and windows, trapping guards outside and cutting Kayla's reinforcements in half. The hall became a cage. Just us and her. You never understood, Joanna, Kayla sneered, tossing aside her empty rifle and drawing a wicked-looking combat knife. "I'm building something better. Stronger. You're just afraid of change." I said nothing. Words were useless now. I charged. Kayla met me halfway, knife flashing. Steel clashed against steel as I blocked with a metal rod scavenged from the wreckage. Sparks flew. Pain bloomed across my forearm as the blade nicked me. She fought with brutal efficiency, every move aimed to kill. But rage fueled me. Not just anger at Kayla. Anger at the lies. At the betrayal. At the world she was trying to build over the broken bones of the innocent. Kiara fought to flank her, but Kayla anticipated every move, forcing me to hold the line. Lucy, meanwhile, frantically worked on hacking the final override for the lockdown, her face pale and determined. Seconds stretched into eternity. Kayla shoved me back, disarming me with a brutal twist. The rod clattered across the floor. She raised the knife for the killing blow. Then a shot rang out. Kayla staggered, a look of shock flashing across her face. Lucy stood behind her, trembling, the smoking pistol still in her hands. Kayla dropped to her knees. But even as she fell, her lips curled into a chilling smile. "This isn't over," she whispered, before collapsing onto the marble. The alarms still wailed around us, but for a moment, the world was silent. We had survived. But the fight was far from finished. The staircase spiraled upward, a narrow spine of iron winding into the shadows above. Lucy clutched the drive tightly, her steps faltering with exhaustion. Kiara kept close, one pistol raised, covering our rear. I could hear the distant pounding of boots. Kayla's remaining forces were regrouping. We had minutes. Maybe less. "This way," I urged, pushing open a heavy service door. Beyond it, a maintenance shaft stretched up like a throat of rust and steel, thin ladders bolted into the walls. Kiara gave me a look. "You have got to be joking." "No other way." One by one, we climbed, muscles burning, lungs heaving. Every clang of a boot against the ladder sent echoes shivering through the shaft. Higher and higher. The final data relay was at the summit, perched atop the citadel like a crown. If we uploaded the information there, the world would finally see what Kayla had hidden. The experiments, the disappearances, the corruption rotting the core of her utopia. Halfway up, Lucy cried out. The drive slipped from her fingers, tumbling into the void below. I lunged, catching at a heartbeat before it disappeared into darkness. Close. Too close. Above us, a hatch loomed, its bolts rusted but still holding. Kiara reached it first, firing 3 rapid shots into the hinges. The hatch groaned and sagged. We burst out onto the rooftop. The night hit us like a slap, freezing, howling wind ripping at our clothes. Below, the city sprawled out, glittering and unaware of the battle raging in its heart. I sprinted across the roof, cradling the drive like a newborn, searching desperately. There. The relay tower, a spindly structure bristling with antennae and blinking lights. We had made it. Then, from the rooftop access door, a new figure emerged. Not Kayla. Another enforcer, clad in heavier armor, rifle ready. Kiara opened fire without hesitation, forcing him into cover behind an air vent. Lucy bolted for the relay, connecting the drive to a service port with trembling hands. I covered her, pistol barking, heart hammering. Seconds. We only needed seconds. The enforcer lobbed a flashbang. White light detonated across the rooftop, searing my vision. Blind, deaf, I stumbled, firing wildly. Somewhere, I heard Lucy scream. Then a crackle of static. The city lights flickered. One by one, giant screens across the skyline began to change. Kayla's propaganda images melting away. Replaced by truth. Footage of hidden laboratories. Cages. Experiments on civilians. Executions disguised as disappearances. The city gasped as one. The enforcer hesitated, lowering his weapon in shock. Kiara did not. She tackled him hard, slamming him unconscious against the roof. We stood there, panting, battered, victorious. The world below had changed forever. But as I looked at the burning skyline, I knew this was only the beginning. A storm was coming. And we would be ready.